Worse things you will agree, people better men than we. But a good time was had by all, especially by Marty, all the time. A good time was had by all. Thank you, everybody.
Well, that certainly is going to be tough to follow. For those of you who are looking at your program wondering, who is that guy? I am not Dr. Wayne L'Esperance Jr. I've been to New England College to go there, but no, Wayne was not able to be here today. He was taken ill, so I've been nominated. I'm Mark Larson. I've known Arnie for more than a couple of decades, and my good friend Susan goes back to a time when Arnie and they were raising their children. So I got nominated to substitute for Wayne today. I am going to take a minute. I'm a lawyer, so that means at least 5 probably, but I'll do my best. It's a nice entree here that Nick and the band played. The flanks was really wonderful. I think it's great music. But after Arnie and Marty got together and we met with them, talked to Marty a little bit. He talked about his love for the Capitol Center here, and he suggested that because when I was in high school, I actually worked in a movie theater. He said, well, why don't you come back? And he convinced me that I should become an usher here. And I still remember, this is a great entree to this music. It was almost as if we planned this. I was here the first time I ushered, and the way it worked out, it was actually a Fish knockoff band kind of thing from Maine. It was sort of it was rock and roll music. There were a lot of young people here, and we were here in our tuxedos. There are house managers here tonight. They've got their tuxedos on with their bow ties and things. So we were here, and Marty was the house manager that night. And I remember he put me over by this door here. You hear me all right? Yeah, good. He put me by that door here, and Marty's running all over the house, collecting, because, of course, we don't allow smoking here. Anyone who's smoking, please put it out now. Marty went around the house picking up what appeared to me to be hand-rolled cigarettes. He got them, he put them into, how we used to do it when people smoked. You had a nice big coffee can and you put some sand in it. So by the end of the night, we probably could have been arrested by the Concord police. I volunteered to take them home. He said I couldn't. So anyway, and I've shared in the food experiences that Arnie and Marty have put together over the years. They've welcomed us at their table. So I have a little bit of a connection with the two of them. So let me read to you what Wayne was going to say about Marty. Wayne writes, I met Marty soon after I moved to New Hampshire. At that point, I still had a bit of an accent and was prone to saying y'all. Marty picked up on this right away and always greeted me with, how y'all doing? It didn't matter if we were on the phone or if it was in the studio for a segment with Arnie on radio or TV. To be honest, I had no idea what to make of Marty. He was a bundle of energy, lightning quick, incredibly smart, and well-read. Now, as an aside, this is me speaking now, as an aside, Arnie told me today that one of the reasons Marty got involved with the college was because he didn't feel like he was smart enough. And I stopped her and I looked up at the heavens, or wherever Marty is, and I said, you got to be kidding me. That's one of the most ridiculous things I've ever heard. But anyway, apparently Wayne and I agreed. He was whip smart. Over the years, I saw all that in action on radio and events, and eventually as part of the New England College Master of Arts in Public Policy program. The one thing I know for sure about Marty is that in all he did, he was a tireless advocate for Arnie. The way he looked at her, worked for her, worked with her, and supported her every move. It was the personification of a loving spouse. Wayne writes, "I strive to be as loving and supportive a husband to my wife as Marty was to Arnie." And I think all of us here today have seen that over the years. Wayne goes on, "There was, however, one aspect of Marty's life that he left undone. He was one class away from completing his master's degree in public policy. As the director of the program, Wayne has recommended to the president of New England College that they accept Marty's work in the community, in raising public awareness, in serving as an advocate for policy reform, in lieu of his final class. I'm very pleased to say that the president of New England College, President Perkins, has accepted this request. And on this day, January 12th, 2014, Martin Capodice is awarded the degree of Master of Arts in Public Policy from New England College. Wayne concludes by saying something that I think many of us, if not all of us here today, feel. We miss Marty. He's in my thoughts and will always serve as a reminder to me to work hard to be the husband, man, and policy advocate he was." Interestingly enough, Wayne concludes with something which I think may be a bit ironic. If you haven't seen the Monitor article today about Marty, you should read it, because what Wayne then says is, "God bless you, Marty, and I'll see you in the next life."
Good afternoon. My name is Dennis Lohman, and I've known Marty for about 20 years. It started on a softball field for a co-ed softball team. And we connected almost instantly. And we had a lot of opportunity to do that because after every game, we would go to Milano's, share some pizza and some beverages. And as most of you know, Marty wore the "I am an atheist" badge very proudly. The Sunday before he passed away, Roy McCandless and I were with him at the hospital, and the hospital worker was asking him a bunch of questions, and Marty was getting quite irritated. And the question was, "Religious affiliation?" And he goes, "Yes, atheist." Now, I am an evangelical Christian. So when we would go to Milano's and eat pizza and share some beverages, we had a lot of opportunity to discuss our differences on many subjects. But one of the biggest things that I remember about Marty is that it was always done respectfully. We may have disagreed, but we also always respected each other. And I'm just going to share quickly a couple of memories of Marty. I knew Cami and Nick before I had ever met them. Marty was always talking about them, how much he loved them. And Nick and Cami, I can't see anything, but wherever you are so blessed to have a dad who loves you so much. And then there were times where I'd preach at church, an evangelical church. So I don't think the top priority on Marty and Arnie's list on a Sunday morning was to go to church. But when I was preaching, Marty and Arnie were there. And I just think about that and just the selflessness and the humility that he showed, because it wasn't necessarily really important to him, but I was important to him. So what I was doing was important to him, and I think we can take that and apply it to our lives. And when I told one of the basketball coaches from last year that Marty passed away, he said, "I'm sorry to hear about your dad." So we coached baseball, softball, and basketball together for about 10 years. We shared a love of kids in a unique way to define success. It was never about winning. Marty was awesome with the kids. So I'm going to have Ashlyn and Mackenzie share a story about Coach Marty. And then I'm going to share, I received 4 other stories from kids and parents about his coaching, and then I'm going to quickly wrap it up. So Mackenzie.
Hello, my name is Mackenzie. I know Marty because he was my basketball coach. Marty was very nice and a good basketball coach at that. But sadly, our dear friend, father, brother, son, and husband, and basketball coach lost his life to cancer. I have always remembered that Marty said, if you have the ball and you keep your eye on the basket, you're most likely to get a shot. And it turns out he was not wrong.
I'm Ashlyn, and I know Marty because he was my basketball coach too. He never rose his voice and never said anything negative. He was a very nice man. My favorite thing about Marty was he and his wife Arnie threw the best parties and had us make our own pizzas. He also was a great basketball coach because if he saw something that we needed to work on, he would tell us in the nicest way he could. But sadly, our dear friend and coach had lost his battle against cancer last year.
Karen Thurber Wells and John Wells sent me this note. For 4 years, our daughter was coached by the Marty Dennis team. She began playing in 3rd grade, and under their guidance, she learned to be aggressive, how to be a team player, and best of all, to win and lose with grace. Marty's coaching taught her not only how to be a good sport on the court, but also in everyday life. Marty was an inspiration. He always showed up with a smile and words of encouragement. Even when it was apparent Marty was having a difficult day, I remember one game, he showed up after a recent surgery. Marty always found a kind word to say to our daughter. He would pat her on the back and say, "This girl has great enthusiasm, great spirit, or way to be aggressive." One of my favorite memories will be the team parties. No one but Marty and Arnie would let 20 kids have full run of their beautiful house, full of breakables and antiques. The kids were allowed to tour the house unattended, to play games of hide and seek, and to ride the antique elevator. Their hospitality was unmeasured. Marty has touched our family. He has taught us the value of giving to the greater community. He has inspired us with his thoughtful words and has been an example that I hope we can follow. My oldest daughter, Jennifer, she wrote this. Marty was a blessing to everyone he met. He was funny, sweet, and sincere. The number one thing that stuck out to me is that Marty always went out of his way to talk to me and ask how I was doing, no matter how long it had been since I had seen him, and no matter what he was in the middle of doing, which was usually coaching. He will be greatly missed. And this is a story from Ben and Emma Stevenson. And something I'm going to do right now, don't worry, I have clothes on under this shirt, but I'm going to take this shirt off because I know this purple shirt and the red shirt that I have under it represent the last 2 basketball teams that we coached. Three years ago, when Emma first played coach pitch baseball, it was our first time with Coach Lohman and his staff. We did not know exactly what to expect, but always kept an open mind to these new beginnings. Not 10 minutes into practice, I hear a gruff voice scream at my daughter, "Emma!" Great, I think. This coach has no idea that she is 6 and doesn't need to be yelled at. As I look over at this bearded maniac, I see his scowl turn to a quick smile as he gives Emma a thumbs up and says, "Good job." The raspiness is still there, but the tone of caring shines right through this time. Emma is all smiles, goes on to have a couple more plays, met with the same reaction. She is hooked on baseball by the end of the day. That is how these things work. A child can love or hate a sport that fast. A child can be scared off by a bad coach that quickly. Marty always understood that. Marty always made sure that regardless of how good a child was, that they always had fun. Hard work can take care of better performance, but a child who is scared off by a bad coach might never pick up that glove or a soccer ball again. Fast forward 3 years. Dennis, Marty, Coach Dave, and Coach Ben have tried to work with this group of kids as often as possible. Marty has been there regardless of anything he had going on. There were some that called us the Brain Trust. Okay, we called ourselves that. But we had gone through soccer, a second baseball season, and basketball. Marty had opened up his home to a wild pack of basketball girls for an end-of-the-season celebration. Emma has moved to Concord, and Marty has just passed. We have an indoor soccer game and discussed on the ride in about Coach Marty finally passing. Emma wanted to play up front and score a goal for Coach Marty. When she gets her chance in the second half, she puts it in. As she is running down the field, I scream at her in my best rough, raspy tone, "Emma!" She looks at me, caught off guard, just a bit. I then smile and say, "Good job." She smiles and gives me a thumbs up. She knows. Thanks, Coach Marty. We love you. He also coached my daughters a lot, Eliza and Rebecca Lohman, and this is what they had to say. Marty was a very important person in our lives. He helped coach our softball, baseball, and basketball teams every year. He was so devoted to the teams that we played on. He kept us all laughing, and that was one of the reasons why everybody loved him. He was funny, and he always made the practices fun. He always encouraged us and gave us hope. The end of the season parties at his house are some of the times neither of us will ever forget. Can you see that theme? These parties are awesome. We love you, Marty. Love Eliza and Rebecca. So, the title of this segment is Living Intentionally and Effectively. And this is what Marty wanted when he conveyed to me in our last email in September. I wrote, "Hello, my friend. How can I love you during this rough stretch?" And, of course, you're going to be able to tell. Well, my wife gave me a tissue, but I like the shirt better. Marty replied, "I have to turn this around. You are what is important. Your work with kids, your love of people, your teaching, your love of those who need help. These are a minuscule example of how important you are. I told Arnie over the weekend that my regret is that I wasn't much more effective with my life. I could have made more impact. Continue where I leave off. Love you, my man." And there's a reason why we're up here talking about the relationships Marty has. We're not talking about the car that he drove or how much money he had or the other material things. Those are necessary, but not nearly as important as relationships. Marty knew that, but it also wasn't just a mental exercise. He lived it out daily. And let's not forget Arnie, Cami, and Nick. We must stop by, give them a call, or share life with them. We love you, Marty. God bless.
I think you understand why we had to do this today. And I guess I need to say to you, every day I was with him, I knew exactly what I had married, exactly whose hand I held. And I was so honored to be a part of his life. I have a script because I have to stay on script because I'm too scared, actually. But I do want to explain the Capitol Center for the Arts to those of you who know that he house managed here. But I told this story when they did a celebration for the Capitol Center. When we were going to get married, my first thought was that I wanted David Jones, who had been the chaplain to the State House at St. Paul's Church, to perform the wedding. It turned out that my good friend Andrew Valinsky, an attorney, ended up doing it. But David Jones said, well, before I marry you, we need to talk. So I said, sure. And we went over, and he said, I need to talk to you about your religious leanings. And I went, well, you can have a conversation with me, but it's going to be really brief with Marty. And I was wrong. Marty and David talked for almost 40 minutes. And at the end of the conversation, David looked at Marty and said, oh God, Marty, you do have a church. It's the Capitol Center for the Arts. So I welcome you to his church and do encourage you to read today's Concord Monitor. Not only is it a story about Marty, it's a story about the Capitol Center for the Arts. And it begins in an interesting way. It begins with atheist and ends with amen. So it covers it all. Now I will read my script. This event is dedicated to every former altar boy, fruit and vegetable man, Vietnam vet, circus performer, book author, brother, single dad, state worker, coach, member of Mensa, and no, John Sununu was never a member of Mensa. I made sure they knew, guys. Supporter of the arts, house manager, blood donor, Cardinals and Red Sox fan, wordsmith, softball player, heck, any kind of ball player, radio producer, civil libertarian, vital signs editor, punster, cook, bread maker, lover, atheist, cancer fighter, loving husband, and friend. The very last time I was at the Capitol Center for the Arts with Marty, we had tickets to see comedian Bill Maher perform his one-man stand-up act. It was Saturday, October 5th, 2013, to be exact, about 4 weeks before he died. This was my big 60th birthday present. And in true Marty fashion, the best present he could imagine was one that he would want to receive himself. And a night with Bill Maher was at the top of a very short list. So let me just set the record straight here, everyone. I like watching Bill Maher on HBO, although there are times he does make me apoplectic. But it was Marty that made sure I did not miss an episode. Ugh, the beauty of on-demand TV. So let me confess here and now that that night was one of the most entertaining nights of our life. The CCA staff made sure we had great seats in front of the mezzanine. It was a tough walk up the stairs, but the perfect place to view Bill Maher. We sat down with 1,500 of our closest friends we had never met, and at the end of his performance, they had to peel the entire packed house off the ceiling. Maher was funny, he was moral, he talked truth to power, he was a damn blast. We went with old friends, Nancy and Len Gerzon, and we were all blown away at how wonderful the evening was. I kept thanking Marty into the wee hours of the night. Well, it got me thinking, after Marty died, that if I could set the perfect table, you know, that's how food is such a recurring theme in all this. It's just unbelievable. All right, if I could set the perfect table for him at 15 Rumford Street, who would I invite? Ready? It would have consisted of Esquire columnist and NPR's Only a Game commentator, that Reverend Charlie Pierce. Also at the table, paleontologist and popular science author Stephen Jay Gould. He used to refer to him as his God, who the New York Times described as writing in a voice that combined a learned Harvard professor and a baseball-loving everyman. Heck, Stephen Jay was so prolific that he was called the Cal Ripken Jr. of essayists. On a side note, Marty's intellectual champion, Stephen Jay Gould, died just weeks before we were married in 2002 of cancer, which had spread to his brain. A premonition? Perhaps. Who else at the table? Oh, I love this man, Pope Frank, the 76-year-old Jesuit who's been offering a view of Catholicism that my atheist husband could admire and imagine. Why? Because it centers on caring and kindness. Bill Maher, see above. And last, Stan Musio. Stan who, you say? Stan Musio. He was an outfielder with the St. Louis Cardinals for 22 seasons. He played in 3 World Series, the last one being in 1946. Marty was born in 1942. Stan was Marty's favorite baseball player of all time. As you figured out, Marty loved baseball. He told me that as a kid, he managed to play virtually every day of the year, weather permitting, and was willing to get his ears boxed by his mother, Wilma, for staying out past curfew just to get one more inning in. When Stan the Man Musio died in January of 2013, Marty's oldest friend, Denny Matthews, a Baseball Hall of Famer announcer for the Kansas City Royals, told us we needed to watch the YouTube video of Bob Costa performing the eulogy for Stan. As the two of us sat glued in front of the computer with tears pouring down our cheeks, Marty heard Costa tell the story of a remarkably decent man who, more than anything, wanted to make people happy. Someone that sounded very much like the father he adored, Nick Sr. Me, I heard Bob Costa describe a man who had almost all of the characteristics that made me adore Marty. I went back and reread Costa's beautiful, poignant eulogy, and one line jumped out. Hank Aaron once said, "I didn't just like Stan Musio, I wanted to be like him." You're not going to believe it. I heard the same sentiment expressed by doctors and professors and mail carriers and ushers. They didn't just like Marty, they wanted to be like him. There could be no greater compliment. My friend Sheila said that Marty held Stan up as a hero. What he didn't realize is that he had become that hero. So as we close this afternoon, I am so grateful you all came, but you're grateful you came too. Marty would love it. Frankly, he would have expected nothing less. A place for an eclectic array of wonderful people to meet each other. A room filled with the children he adored, both his own and those he coached. Fabulous music, and of course, food. The Velcro that holds an event together and encourages folks to linger. So you need to know, I was given instructions by my husband. They were written down in his living will in case anyone challenged me. He had thought that he was going to leave his body to science, but after months of being part of a clinical trial, he figured he'd done his thing for science. Instead, he wanted me to have him cremated, which we did, all dressed up in his tuxedo, his beloved uniform that he wore for 18 years, house managing at the Capitol Center for the Arts. And then he wanted me to take his ashes and place them in little vials or envelopes and hand them out to friends and family, obviously you, with instructions to take him to a party, a play, a concert, a hike, anything wonderful. So, ladies and gentlemen, when you go downstairs, I encourage you to take Marty with you, maybe to a ball game or a ballet or a trip to Belize. Anywhere in this wonderful world that brings you happiness. And be sure to follow the instructions on the back of the envelope, which include a link to an interactive map where you can post where, when, and how
You shared Marty with the world. And just to prove